Robert Redford's latest film is All the President's Men. He worked in it for 3 years, backed it, produced it, and he co-stars with Dustin Hoffman in this story of the investigation leading from Watergate to the White House. His previous films include The Candidate, another political subject, Jeremiah Johnston, set in a wild natural environment which Redford reverts to and champions, Downhill Racer, the first film he backed himself, and of course The Sting and Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. I mean, did you find yourself that particularly after Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, that it was very difficult to break away from being the person that everybody wanted to think you were?
Sure. Yeah, really. It's not pleasant. That's the whole double-edged sword. That because you're naive at the time, you're just playing a role, and you started in the business. If you started as I did, as an actor who liked to think he came from the legitimate stage, which I did in New York, you think of yourself first all as an actor, and then suddenly you're playing a variety of different roles, and no one's really making too much about it. And then suddenly you're in a particular production that's very successful. And then the next thing you know, you're kind of labeled. And as you stretch to a different role, the acceptance is less. The credibility of being able to stretch is less, and that's bothersome.
And people don't want you to stretch, do they?
Well, I think you're right. I suspect people don't. I'm beginning to think more and more that people tend to want to restrict you to a certain slot. And if they've been pleased by a performance in that slot, they just as soon have it stay there. But for me, that's for television. That's for television series. And I don't think it's bad. It's perfectly fine, but it's not for me.
Well, what seems to have happened is that you've dug deeper and deeper into your privacy. I mean, your place in Utah, you're taking time off to do exactly what you want to do, your own private political and social and intellectual concerns, that sort of thing. But you must come up against the paradox again and again that being a movie star on the one hand and wanting so ferociously to be a private person on the other, there's quite a bit of tension.
It's almost libelous.
Libeling yourself?
Yeah, really. It's not pleasant. It's not easy and it's not pleasant, but to go try and tell someone about it. It's like saying, God, I'm so unhappy, I'm so rich, and expecting people to feel sorry for you. It's like saying that. You just can't talk about it. It's something you have to endure in the best way you can and try to work out the space in your own life as best you can to do what you want to do, to create the selfish time to grow. It's very difficult, what frightens me more than anything is that the shrinking. The environment shrinks on you. I mean, people begin to treat you more and more like an object, and the danger is that you begin to feel more and more like an object, and the chances are you'll begin to act more and more like one. And the thing that made you what you are. There's a wonderful line, incidentally, in a book about Tom Mix, of all people. It says, what is it about success that makes us lose the thing that made us a success in the first place? And there's great truth to that, I think, because you fear the thing that made you what you are, your ability to observe.
Capacity to hang around, for example.
You bet. And you're exactly, and your love of other people and watching behavior and being involved in the action of situations straight across the country, whether it's a bar, a diner. I used to love that. I used to hitchhike back and forth across America, here in Europe. To me, that was great fuel and great entertainment source for me. And all that's reduced by the fact that it's difficult to watch other people when they're watching you. And I'm awkward and self-conscious in crowds. I worry about them, I fear them, and I don't trust them. So you carve your own space for yourself, but the danger is that space is usually an isolated one, and you get no feedback.
You've tended to turn to nature, really, haven't you?
I haven't turned to nature. Nature's always been there for me. To me, it's comfortable. It's very comfortable, and I'm happy. You say nature, yeah, I'm happy there.
Climbing and riding and...
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
I feel good. Just that simple. There's nothing heavier really than that. I also happen to love a really good, hard city. I love New York City because to me, it's an honest city that makes no pretenses to be anything other than what it is. Dirty, hard, rough, It's nice.
But your life has definitely been constricted by success in ways which you mind about.
Yeah, I do. I can't goof off. I can't. If you goof off, you're an exhibitionist. If you goof off, you're staging something for publicity. I used to do a lot. I used to have more fun years ago. I walked to work once in pajamas down Broadway. I sat for an hour in a trash can on 57th Street and Broadway just to see what the reaction of people was going to be. Very few noticed. It's hard to do that now because what are you trying to prove, Yeah. And you become self-conscious and all that. But that's the way it is.
But there have been great benefits, haven't there? One of which has been that it's given you enormously more freedom to choose the films you do.
That's right. There's no question that that's an advantage. I mean, you have the right to exercise more control over your life, career-wise, is a definite plus. It's just something that has to be worked out very carefully. There's also the threat of success can be very softening. And it's not, that worries me.
Softening in what way?
Softening, easy, comfortable. Comfort is dangerous to your work, I think, as an artist, whether it's a writer, painter, actor. To me, that is, as Tennessee Williams says, the bitch goddess. That if you play too much into it, you run the risk of getting soft in your own life, and you lose the edge that produces whatever you do.
The old stars that in the 30s and 40s, rather like rich people lived together in order to know each other and be comfortable with each other, used to live together in Hollywood in order to, as it were, be comfortable with each other to a certain extent. You've opted out of that completely. You're almost smack in the middle of America.
Well, I was born there.
Yeah.
It's got as much to do with it as anything. California or Los Angeles holds no fascination for me because it has no roots. The roots that I ever felt as a kid growing up there are gone. They've long since been gone. Also, Los Angeles to me was a place that you left to go somewhere else because everything was too perfect. The sun was always shining. No one seemed to be starving. Everyone seemed mildly happy. Everyone looked well. It was sort of suffocating.
You take quite exceptional, I suppose, interest in the making of every film you go into. Is almost the whole of your life devoted to seeing things which will turn into films, or is there no time out in a way? I mean, Jeremiah Johnson you're concerned with ecology, and you've built a house in a certain way to use the light and sun and that sort of thing, and you yourself did mountaineering and skiing, and these go into films and go into films and go into films. Is that the way it is, that you want your life to sort of turn into films and then go back into your life and turn?
Yeah, it's what I do best, I think, and the idea is very attractive to me to put your concerns, problems that you're working out in your own life into your work. I think it's the best of your work when you do it. It certainly hasn't hurt other artists. It hasn't hurt Norman Mailer, for example. He certainly works out his life in his work, and I'm interested in seeing it. I'm not articulate enough in any other medium to do it. I'd much rather see it in behavior. I'd much rather see it visually. As a kid growing up, I had little or no use for words. And books that were read aloud to me in class, I snoozed on. I just daydreamed out the window because it meant nothing to me. Someone would draw a picture or bring an animal into the class that I could see. That meant something to me. So to me, I think life has been a question of more of a visual thing. And so the idea of working that into my work, if I see, I don't think there's an actor that doesn't view everything in terms of behavior. Hoffman is terrific at that, just terrific. Hoffman is the consummate actor in that sense. He views everything as a possible moment to put into a film. And I think most actors are that way. I know I am. I love it when things happen. I say, gee, that would be wonderful. Log that on the back of your head. You put that into a film.
You started off as a painter, though, didn't you?
Yeah, right. Well, the same thing. I mean, I would put that on canvas. I couldn't wait to, at the end of a day, if something happened, to run home and sketch it out of my mind, to sketch it down on paper. What had become indelible as a photograph in my mind, to transmit that to a canvas, a paper, and now on film. It's all kind of the same thing. I don't see that much difference.
But there's also a sense in, let's just stick to Jeremiah Johnson for a moment, but in a lot of your films where you're on the film itself actually physically pushing yourself very hard. I mean, in Jeremiah Johnson, when you've gone across some of those rides, and when you've sat after you've returned and the squaw, the wife and the boy have been killed, and you looked as if you've stayed up for a day and a night. Well, you actually look as if you've stayed up for a day and a night on the film. And in a sense, I mean, you might well have done. Are you pushing yourself on the movies? I mean, do you enjoy pushing yourself physically a great deal?
No, I don't. No. It was just necessary. I can do it, and I'm glad I can do it. And I would rather do it myself than have a stand-in do it, unless it's jumping 80 foot off of a tower. But to me, that's part of the film. And in that particular film, that had as much to do with what it was about as anything, is seeing this person have to go through the hardships of building a fire, weathering the winter, or whatever it was. So of course I would do it. I would certainly commit myself to my craft in that way, or whatever way I could. And then there are occasions when, I grew up in athletics. I like physical things. You just have fun doing it. I mean, Butch Cassidy was just fun for me. I felt guilty getting paid for it. I mean, it was just that much fun.
But switching to a more obvious film like Downhill Racer, which was the first film you backed, I believe, wasn't it? Where you're pushing yourself very hard, doing the skiing there.
You know, that was dangerous.
Was it?
Yeah, I didn't do all my own skiing in that. A lot of that was actual footage taken from the races in Europe, where we had someone wearing my number run a downhill course. The truth is, I could not run a downhill course from top to bottom. I can ski it, and I could ease down it, but I could not race a downhill course. I would have to be 20 years old and in incredible shape. I can run sections of it, and I can run a slower version, but you couldn't do that unless you were a racer. It's just too much punishment for the body. And I did get in training and traveled with the Olympic team and trained with them and worked with them and went to the races. But, so yes, it took a lot of physical work to do it. But again, it was part of it was easier for me to perform actually doing it, actually skiing out the last few feet of a finish line or going out of a gate. It was easier to act.
But the interesting thing is, like Jeremiah Johnson could have been a romantic story about an outsider who biffs Indians on the head, and instead you turned it into a story about a thoughtful, introvert, tentative, and I thought made it work very well. Similarly, Downhill Racer could have been a sporting ski film about the American boy, the outsider who goes there and wins the gold medal, but it isn't about that at all.
Why did you... We had trouble convincing the studio of that.
But you deliberately set up the obvious and then whipped away in the other direction as fast as you could on Downhill Racer.
That's because that's the way it is to me. I grew up in sports as a kid, and one of the great shocks in my life was finding out that I had been given a false legacy.
What was it?
Well, I was told by my parents and friends, and I was schooled along the idea, what I would call the Boy Scout theory, that it isn't whether you win or lose, it's how you play the game, and that to me was nonsense. And finding out that that was all a lie was a great shock to me, because I was sensing that it wasn't. I was sensing that it was winning that was everything, and especially in my country. The emphasis on winning was bordering on being bizarre, and that I could see that my behavior didn't mean a damn thing if I won. And I could see it in other sports figures. So, and the people that I grew up with in sports were not the golden figures of right out of Boy Scout handbooks. And so I wanted to put something on the screen the way I saw it. That was my view of athletics and my view of what our country does to commercialize sport. And it was a question of picking the sport that would be the most interesting visually to watch. We'd seen football. Skiing was interesting to me because it was a blend of visually, of poetry and danger. It was an interesting blend, and I felt that that would be interesting for an audience to see, plus the fact they had never seen it before. And I am attracted to showing things on films that haven't been seen before. It's sort of the informing part of it.
Well, you travelled around with the US Olympic team while you're doing that,
Yeah.
you said. And yet the film isn't very... doesn't show them in a very engaging light. I mean, it doesn't slap them down, or it isn't nasty to them, but they do come out as rather one-dimensional, bossed about, subservient to an idea of winning, which is both overriding and, in a way, corrupting, and so on and so on. Did they see the film?
Maybe what they think of it, they didn't like it. Very, very seldom have I been involved with or made a film where the subjects who we like to think were perfectly characterized or accurately portrayed have liked it. The ski people, for example, in The Candidate, all the politicians who saw the film hated it and thought it was trash. Their staffs loved it. That was good enough for me, since I don't think politicians know truth from fiction anyway, for the most part. That didn't bother me at all. But with athletics, the coaches and so forth were stung, because clearly it was an indictment against the managers of our country, the people who manage athletes before they're old enough to know any better, before they're fully grown. They come in, they grab them, and they manipulate them, and then they toss them away like an old shoe when they no longer have any or serve any purpose. That concerns me. And so it was clearly a shot at them as much as anything else, and if they didn't like it, it's too bad.
There's a scene that that is very moving, is when the young man in Downhill Racer, played by yourself, goes back to his hometown, which is a tiny town in the Midwest. I presume it's in the Midwest.
Colorado.
Yeah, and goes to see his father. And the exchanges between them are minimal, and bereft of any emotional nourishment on either side. Did you feel yourself cut off from your backgrounds by leaping into a career completely outside it? I mean, I'm not saying is that autobiographical, because it isn't, it's in the film. But did you feel similarly cut off when you said, earlier you said California, your roots had easily been rubbed out?
I wasn't cut off by my family. I cut myself off from my background and from my environment willfully, because it was unnourishing to me. It was stifling. It's not a reflection of anything autobiographical in my own family, although there was no question about the fact that it was difficult for me to communicate what was happening inside with what I should be doing outside. There were two directions there. But I had grown up with a lot of people who had extreme difficulty in communicating, and parents who don't care. To me, the chasm, the silence between generations is important. It's interesting to me. People communicating and unable to communicate. It's as much about the effort that one makes as anything else, and connection. People making connection with each other is very interesting to me, and when it misses, it's just as interesting, and why it misses is interesting. And that, to me, was a classic syndrome in America, especially with the athlete. A lot of athletes, if they don't come out of families that are whipping them to be the athletes they never were, and there's a lot of that. I couldn't be a great tennis player, so by God, you're going to be a great tennis player. And they shop them around and so forth, and same with other sports. Well, there's also a group that comes from no love, no affection, no communication, and something drives them out on their own to get out of that background, and they become someone. But they go back, and the communication's not there. So it was about that.
Yeah. Is that, do you think that's particularly American of your generation?
Yeah, I do. And where I'm from, especially.
It's particularly West Coast, isn't it?
Yeah, particularly West Coast. Just no one seemed to be talking to anybody. You just fired up your car and kicked on down the road, you know, or got in a fight or something. I mean, no one talked much.
In California, while you were presumably not voting for Nixon, it was it was you set the candidate
Right.
in the West Coast, which again to take the burden of explaining the film briefly, it's simply about a young man who is picked out to be a candidate for running as a U.S. senator, and eventually, not only to his surprise, but in a sense to his, it disturbs him. He wins. It disturbs him because the guarantee he's been given at the start is that he'll lose, written on that matchbox.
Winning is disturbing.
Fun?
It's disturbing.
Yeah. Why is it disturbing to become a U.S.
Because of the
senator?
responsibility, because of the loss. To me, there's great loss associated with winning, but there's only one thing I can think of that's worse, and that's losing. But the character in that film was designed. He was a test tube case, really, designed. As an actor, I didn't want to play him. I wanted to play the campaign manager. To me, that was a much more interesting part. That was
the guy who comes to pick a winner, yeah.
Yeah. I'm pretty depressed about the American political scene, but then I don't support candidates, I support issues, but the current political scene is so depressing to think that we are offering up the same recycled hash that we've been getting for years and years and years. That's why it's depressing to me. You know, you make a film about it, and I don't feel, I guess I'm kind of cynical about that. I don't feel that film had any impact. If it had, we wouldn't be doing the same thing that we're doing. I mean, when I see Henry Jackson, who I don't know how familiar people are in this country with the candidates who are running for office, but when I see Henry Jackson climbing up onto an elephant in Madison Square Garden, because that's what happens in Madison Square Garden, they have a circus, and does it as though that's what he does regularly. And when I see him going into the Italian section and saying, talking about that great American Columbus, my stomach turns. And it's baby kissing time, that's all it is. And when we have other candidates who seem to be vamping for not saying anything, the art of confusion, the art of ambivalence, and it is artful. And I have no interest in that because it's certainly not what the country needs. I mean, the country needs a hell of a lot more than political rhetoric and a lot of sloganeering. You know?
But you went into the political life of America when you did The Candidate. You went into it on another side when you did All the President's Men. But let's start with All the President's Men. When did you first get interested in it?
About the time it was happening. It was 1972, and the break-in was just about 3 or 4 weeks old. And I was in a spot in the country where there were a lot of political reporters and entertainment reporters. We were promoting a film, The Candidate, as a matter of fact. And I was listening to their conversations about the break-in. And I said, oh yeah, what happened about that? Because there had been a big splash when it happened, and then it went underground, it went dry. And I couldn't figure it out. And they said that it would probably stay underground. And I said, what do you mean by that? And they said, well, it's, and there was a lot of sidelong glances and snickering and so forth. And I said, well, what? I don't know what you're saying. And they said, well, it's probably tied to Nixon. And I said, well, are we going to hear that? Are we going to see that? And they said no. They were very cynical about the whole prospects of the truth ever coming out, and I was very depressed by their attitude, you know, much less the fact that it could be true. So they said, or in many cases implied, that Nixon was going to be reelected, and the power of that particular administration and the people that he worked for him was so strong that people were afraid. And the idea that Washington, the entire city of Washington, could be frightened, and our whole congressional leadership could be frightened of something, particularly one man, really fascinated me. And it also had a lot to do with the fact that I was harboring for a long time a very deep conviction that he was a man who was not telling us the truth. He was also a man that seemed very inhuman. He seemed to be screened against humanity. And that stemmed largely from the fact that as a kid, growing up in California, he was my senator. So he seemed to be plaguing me all my life, like some bad cold that wouldn't go away, you know. And he had given me an award once when I was very young. I was about 13. And when he handed me the award, there was nothing happening. And I thought, that's really incredible. I remembered that about him, that I had absolutely no contact with the man whatsoever. And then through the years, his political career and my years growing up, he seemed to be appearing from time to time and never convincing to me, always slightly phony, slightly insincere. And it bothered me, that's all. So when I heard this story about him, I hoped that the truth would come out. That was a private hope of a private citizen that really did not care for the man and suspected that maybe the worst was possible from him. Also as a citizen, I was concerned about the truth, the one conduit to the truth at that time being the press, being able to perform their duty. So when they told me this, I got quite upset about it. And I said, what are you going to do, just sit around and drink free booze and laugh about it, or are you going to do anything about it? And they said, well, it isn't a question of that. You're pretty naive. The fact of the matter is the paper, one, has to support you. The editors have to support you. They have to have the money to be able to put reporters on the story for great lengths of time. It takes a lot of hard work. And plus the fact the man probably is going to be reelected, and people don't want to take the chance of being out on the line if he comes in office having criticized him because he's a very vindictive man.
But all this did happen, in a sense. The two reporters of the Washington Post were backed by
That's
the
right.
editor, Bradley, and by the owner, Kathleen Graham, and they tracked the story down. It's significant that they weren't political reporters, but
No,
reporters
they weren't.
outside that. But you did get interested 4 weeks after the story broke. Did you then go instantly up to see Woodward?
No, that was in the summer, and I was tired of making films, and I was tired after The Candidate, and I wanted to go away. I wanted to go to the mountains. So I did, and I just watched the papers very carefully that summer to see if this was going to be true, and it was for the most part, except every now and then there was this blurb. It seemed as though there was this force trying to emerge against a very heavy ceiling, and obviously I was cheering the stories along, but they would disappear and go underground again. So when I went back to New York in September, the big news broke about the Dirty Tricks campaign, the fact that there was sabotage tactics and dirty tricks and a slush fund, illegal, all of it leading supposedly to inside the White House. And that was Woodward and Bernstein. And that's when I became aware of them being the two reporters that had been breaking these stories all the way along. Now that's not to say that no one else was doing anything. In fact, there were other newspapers that were trying, but the important thing was that the big newspapers, the powerful newspapers, and the majority of the press was doing nothing.
But in fact, you pushed in, didn't you, and went to see them, and then bought the rights before they'd written the book.
I went to see them shortly after Nixon was reelected,
Yeah.
and they were at their lowest. They had bottomed out, and everyone felt that they were wrong, and they were getting castigated pretty well by not only the administration, but the public and so on. So that interested me. That interested me most, and up to that point I had been mostly interested as a private citizen. Then I became interested from the standpoint of it being possible film material because of the difference of the two characters. They were such contrasting types that it seemed good material to me for film. So I contacted them, had difficulty at first. They didn't want to talk to me. I don't think they believed I was calling. And they were frightened at the time also. It was not an easy place to be in Washington in those days. There was a great deal of fear that prevailed. And so when I finally was able to make the contact, it was with Woodward. And I said, look, I don't want to go through this back and forth. I sense you don't trust me and you don't know who I am. Let me come to Washington and in 10 minutes I'll tell you what I have in mind. So I did. And when I did that, he seemed slightly interested. And it took months. It took 3 months before we finally all sat down and came together. And I said, this is what I'm interested in doing. And if you say yes, fine. If not, fine. And they said fine.
Were they harassed or worried by the fact that, in a sense, you had bought the option for a book they hadn't yet written?
Well, I didn't buy the option then. The way that I told them the idea that I had for the film and that I felt it should end. No matter what happened, I felt the end should come at just the point when they felt they were wrong. And the truth had not come out, and Nixon was at the height of his glory. That interested me. And that the film would deal primarily with that period of time that no one knew what was happening. And what did they do that no one else was doing? That to me was the mystery, you see. And they liked that idea for a film, but I think they had different plans in terms of their book at that time. You can ask Woodward or Bernstein about it, but I think they were writing a book about the burglars from their point of view. And then they ended up writing about the reporting point of view.
Yeah.
So the rights to the film weren't officially obtained until all the lawyers, agents, legal people, parasites had their hands on it. That was a whole year later.
Were you worried by the fact that on the whole Hollywood portrayal of, or American portrayal of reporters has been the tough romantic hero, Humphrey Bogart or Edward G. Robinson? Or
No, I wasn't. I'd never thought of it that way, and I knew that we were going to be fighting that image because Hollywood had that image, but I don't particularly align myself to the Hollywood image anyway. So I wasn't worried about it because I knew the kind of film that I wanted to see made, and it was going to be a hard-edged film with a lot of design to it, and it was going to be primarily about this profession that no one knew anything about, really. The front page image of newspapers was an antique one, you know, and although there were elements, I must say, as I got into the research, that were very reminiscent of front page.
But you, at the start, were going to make a low-budget film, and you weren't even going to
black
appear...
and white, too.
Yeah, and you weren't going to appear in it yourself.
That's right.
When did it change? When did you decide that you had to appear in it?
When Warner Brothers paid so much money for the film, they said, of course you're going to appear in it, aren't you?
And that was that?
That was that. That was that.
And then you came across Dustin Hoffman after quite a while, it turns out. He was rather surprised you didn't get there earlier.
Well, we wanted to give him, his career was sagging, and we wanted to give it a boost.
Thanks very much.
Welcome.